Thank you, Glenn, for inviting me, and I appreciate being anywhere other than where I was before I got here. Um, my name is Vivian Quattlebaum, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. I have my sobriety date is January 3rd, 1994, for which I'm eternally grateful. I believe that God's grace gets us here, and the steps keep us here. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor, and I love all of them. I have their names, I have their numbers, and they know that they sponsor me. So I continue to be all in because I know what it was like to be all out. And I'm so grateful that I have the wherewithal to know that. Now, beyond that, I try not to think too much. My best thinking got me here. I do have a home group. My home group is the Step and Speaker meeting, Zoom meeting, by the way, that started when COVID started. And we're just rocking it here. And I'm so grateful. And we continued on because the message was being heard here. The solution was, we were all in the solution. And so we continue on. And we're into 4 years now, going strong, and I love it. And so I'm very active in that group, and I get speakers to come in on my Zoom group every Sunday morning. Is an incredible speaker, and aren't we all? I mean, look where we came from. We have an amazing miracle story to tell others precisely what we were like, what happened to change us, and what we're like today. And and so I continue to keep doing this, with 30 years of recovery. I guess the one thing I can tell you for sure that I heard in the rooms, not that I'm so clever, is that if you just don't die, you eventually become an old timer. So I've been continuing to keep coming back, and because I've not found a better solution out there. I've never known how to live my life. I was truly hopeless. And I came here with a problem I didn't even know I had, and I found a solution I didn't know I needed. And that was evidence of you sharing your experience, strength, and hope, which is what's so important about coming to the meetings, to suit up and show up. And, I see people come and go. And, we don't shoot our wounded here. I'm very painfully aware of how hard it is to transition from being who and what we thought we were based on a set of actions we take to become, to see the truth about who we are. And, and I heard your truths. It was like I heard so many years ago, where the heart speaks and the heart listens. And I heard that modicum of truth that I could grab hold to, which gave me hope that for someone of my type, who was just completely restless, irritable, and discontent. I mean, I got here on a death wish. I wanted to kill myself. That was the best thing I could come up with, because if I had to live like I was living, not that I had lost everything so much, I had just had that black hole, that sickness of the soul, that I wanted to die. I did not want to live not one more day. And I believe when you get to that level of a bottom beyond my comprehension or understanding, I think God gave me just a little crack in the armor of, I can only relate to it today as some sort of a spiritual conversion, where I could not stop drinking. For the last 6 months or a year of my drinking, I drank out of control, and I wanted to quit, couldn't stop. Made all these declarations every single day, not drinking tomorrow. And I come home, and against my own will, I'm heading to the freezer, pouring a tumbler full, not a fancy little glass and olives anymore. I'm talking about Tupperware tumbler full. I can't wait to get into the second one. And that's the insanity of alcoholism. Of course, I didn't know all that. And that one night, one more time, I pass out, I come to, and I just have this, it was a vision of my life, and everything that I had ever loved, everything I'd ever wanted in my life had been removed, one drink at a time. And over the course of years, I had a failed marriage because I walked out to go pursue drinking the way I want to drink, with people I want to drink with, do the things I want to do. I walked out on the most precious gifts of my entire being were two beautiful children, and I couldn't be there. I couldn't be the mom they deserved to have because I couldn't take them where I was going. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was in this forward momentum and could not stop. And gosh, I heard years ago, the chains of alcoholism were too soft to be felt until they were too strong to be broken. And I was in full blown insanity, although I didn't know it. And so what happened is that, that one night I was just reached that point of utter and complete desperation. And I believe that gift of desperation is so necessary for us to grab hold to any modicum of hope that we can grab onto and hang on to it. And I came to a meeting the next day, never heard about Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know about the disease of alcoholism, but I saw in action a friend of mine who drank like I drank. She had a terrible car accident one night. I was drinking with her one night. For some reason, I went home. She didn't. She ended up going through the windshield of a car and barely made it out alive. And two women from Alcoholics Anonymous, who I did not know and don't even remember, came to visit her in the hospital and did a beautiful 12-step on her. And she went away to a rehab for a period of time. And I watched her dog for her. And when she came back, you see, it's not so much what people say to me as what they do. I watched recovery in action with her. I saw a miracle where this woman could not drink and now no desire to drink, going to AA. And she was my Ebby. That's who my Ebby was. And she carried a message of depth and weight. And I didn't have to have words around it. I just watched what she did. And she happened to need a job, and she came to work in my little hair salon. And I would come in the mornings and look at those clear, beautiful white. The white part was white, not red and yellow like mine. And I just saw in her something extraordinary. And that's, to me, that's the grace of God, just coming from within through to without. And it touched my heart to see what an amazing transition that had happened for her. And I remember her asking me weeks before, Vivian, if you ever want to go to a meeting. And I absolutely said to her, honey, I am so glad you're going because God knows you need it. See, I don't have the wherewithal to recognize my own train wreck, but I can see hers. And she became that example for me. And on that one night where I passed out, came to, and I had that it was like a vision of my failures, my life of tragedies and the Jekyll and Hyde behaviors and the people that I had loved, all my family members. I walked away from pursuing that drink, and the next thing that followed. Now I'm the alcoholic that goes on to the bitter end. I don't stop till I pass out, get knocked out, whatever, and that's happened to me. So. I don't know where it's going to take me. I'm a blackout drinker. I don't know what all I'm up to, but a few people didn't mind telling me, and I was like, oh, can't possibly be true, because I don't believe what I don't believe if I don't see it. And even when I see it, I don't know the truth from the false. And that's how insane all of this is. I drink until my family disappears. I leave my husband, I leave my kids. I start to become that, where is that? That incomprehensible demoralization. Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything wrong with what I'm doing because I'm not hurting anybody. And that's my absolute belief. And so anyway, that one night, after it was like a vision was revealed to me. And moments before, I simply said, dear God, I don't want to live like this. I can't live like this, not one more minute. And then I had this vision. And the next day, I get up and asked to go to a meeting with Vicki. And those were not thoughts coming out. No, they did not come from me. They came from within me, I'm sure. And through my Evie, which was Vicki. And so I told her, I said, well, maybe I'd like to go to a meeting with you. And I didn't even really know what it was about. And she didn't bother to tell me all the details here. I didn't know what kind of commitment you have to make or what you do. I didn't know anything about it. But here's the miracle. I took a set of actions contrary to how I think, feel, and believe, and my life changed exponentially that day. I stepped across that threshold, and that 2 days before, I could not stop drinking on a daily basis. I drank with impunity when I first started. I had a few problems, and then after that, I could not drink. Then I became a daily drinker, and then I drank when I wanted to quit. I drank when I really truly prayed to stop and couldn't. And now all of a sudden I step across the threshold of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the obsession to drink was removed that day. And that was on January 3rd, 1991. And I've not had a sip of alcohol since. And I walked into those rooms, and my Vicky was there, and some of my old friends that I used to drink and get crazy with were there that I hadn't seen in a few years. And here they were, and they put their arms around me and they said, welcome home, Vivian. We're glad you're here. We've been saving you a chair. That made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, but whatever. I'm kind of in a state of, I don't know what the heck is happening here. But anyway, so I walked through, and they said, come on in, Vivian. Can we get you a cup of coffee? They gave me hugs. They said, you're welcome here. And they said, come on up here and sit with us, and come on up front. I said, you don't have to say anything, just listen. And that took, because I didn't know what to expect. And so I tell my sponsees that, don't worry about talking. As my sponsor told me one time, he says, all you have was the mess. We all know how to do that. We need to hear the message. So if you don't have that, why don't you just sit down and listen? And that took a while, but I did. And I was so grateful for those directions. And then I had somebody say, Vivian, all you have to do here is have a sobriety date. And you need to get a sponsor. You need to get a home group. And you need to get a big book. And so in the back of the room of our clubhouse, we had all these pamphlets, and all these books were laying out. Back in those days, they provided everything. I mean, I thought. And so I went and got a cardboard box and started filling it up with all this stuff, because I thought, well, there's power in knowledge. So I took all these books, and I took all these pamphlets home. Now, I didn't read any of it, but I had it. Come to find out that there was a little charge on each and every one of those. And when I made my amends, I paid for it. But that was a few years after. We come to kind of slowly here. People like me do anyway. And, gosh, I'm so grateful. There's a friend of mine says this frequently, and anything I say that makes a lot of sense didn't come from me. It came from someone else. And I just, like you, Glenn, I just stole it. And so anyway, there is nothing so bad that a drink wouldn't make worse, and there is nothing so good that a drink wouldn't totally destroy. And so I came here with a problem I didn't know I had, and I found a solution coming to those meetings. And there's something magical about sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's like a friend of mine, Don M., talks about the threads of recovery. The tapestry of recovery, if you will. And I believe those threads of recovery sort of reaches out and touches each and every one of us when we suit up and show up here. Doesn't matter what we know, doesn't matter what we understand. All that matters is that we just bring the body, and the mind will eventually follow. And I began to hear, and I don't know why, I was just so attracted to what you had. And I just kept coming back, and I kept hearing more and more evidence of your recovery. And I thought, maybe I can have what they have. Just a little hope right there. And that's what I got. The more I brought the body, the mind did follow eventually. And I was told, but don't use it because it's flawed. So anyways, I began to, they said, you need a sponsor. Now, I didn't really know what that meant. And I just had the privilege of sitting in a chair, watching the woman, the first woman I asked to be my sponsor, pick up her 50-year chip. And that woman has carried a strong and powerful message her entire life. She's worked with all over the world, really. And so She was a psychologist. She was a therapist. She helped start the Oxford House here. She worked with the government. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that she was leaving the country for 2 years, like within the next couple of months. So I said, I'm going to ask her to be my sponsor. Now, that's my best thinking. She's leaving. I'm going to ask her to be my sponsor. And of course, that didn't go anywhere. After about 3 months of sitting in the rooms every day with untreated alcoholism, and I'm not having a desire to drink, that was the first miracle here. A friend of mine came up and said, Vivian, it doesn't say anywhere in this book anything about marijuana. And of course, I didn't know anything because I had never read the book. So I have no idea what I'm doing. Now, this is a friend of mine who's a chronic relapser, and I'm listening to her. And so, and I'm a pot smoker from way back, but it just quit working for me. But the alcohol, I could never lay down. I could lay down all that other stuff. But I'm looking for some relief, and I don't even know where to find it. But she said, so we can do this. And I went, well, oh my God. So out the door we go, and we start doing what we do. And I didn't come to a meeting, not one day after that I wasn't really high, and I thought, you guys are just so hard on everything. Why don't you just relax a little bit? This is not that difficult. And I can tell you for a fact that worked for a little while. And for the next, a little over 2 years, I did that every day, coming to meetings. And what relapse looks like, I want to tell you, is I started off at the front of the room, and somewhere in there, I started sliding my way back into the middle of the rooms. Before you know it, I'm in the back of the rooms. And you know what? I'm getting ready to head out that door because I don't think I need you anymore. And I am dying to come into meetings with untreated alcoholism. And I don't even know it. Now, that friend of mine has never made it back to the rooms. But by God's grace and coming to meetings, something happened where I was able to just lay that aside because it really quit working. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. And I think when we have those little surrenders in the rooms, stone cold sober, desperate and dying, I think God makes a little magical thing happen. And I had been listening to this guy who came down from Boston. His name was Dick Jones. An amazing example of recovery. He incessantly talked every single God blessed meeting about the 4-step. And I thought, God, if I have to hear one more word about that 4-step, I'm going to throat punch him. I just couldn't stand it. Well, that tells you what I know. I'm in the kitchen one day after I have set aside all the party favors and everything. And that was the only thing I was doing, but I could lay that aside. Now, I know God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself when the drink was removed. But I'm standing on the precipice of going back out and killing myself. And I know it because that's where it came from. And I'm in the kitchen getting a cup of coffee one morning, and Dick Jones is standing right beside me. And I go to turn around to walk out of the kitchen. And I literally hit him and spilled coffee on his shirt. And I went to say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, Dick. But what came out of my mouth, unbeknownst to me, was, Dick, will you take me through the 4-step? And I'm going, I can't even believe that came out of my mind, much less out of my mouth. And he said, young lady, I've been watching you for the last couple of years. And he said, right after this meeting, you and I are going to go up to that pew. We have a church pew in our meeting hall. And he said, we're going to go up to that church pew. We're going to kneel down. We're going to say that 3rd-step prayer. And we're going to get busy because you're going to turn your life and your will over to the care of anything better than what you've been doing. And he said, and furthermore, I don't want you thinking because you haven't done a very good job so far. And he was right. And I hadn't even done a 4-step yet. But so I asked Dick basically to sponsor me, and he grabbed and seized that moment. And I'm so grateful that he did. And I was, several months clean and sober. And he said, the first thing you need to do I had an old timer, God bless those old timers, come up to me, and they knew back then that stuff was so smelly. You knew when somebody was smoking pot. So this old timer came up to me and said, Vivian, if you're picking up chips, saying you're honest and picking up those chips, and I did for the next couple of years, he said, if you're not honest, you'll never make it here. And if you're not honest and you're doing that, you're not sober either. And so he said, I don't know, it just impacted me in such a way. I got up the next day and I made an amends to my home group for picking up chips, claiming to be clean and sober, and I was not. And so, and that's when my recovery started, when I had that last surrender. That was the last little thing I was hanging on to. And that was when I asked Dick to take me through the 4th step. And that was when I hit my knees and did that 3rd step. And my life began to change so fast, I can't tell you. I couldn't even keep up with it. So Dick said to me, he said, Vivian, what we're going to do here is I'm not interested in your tale of woes. I'm not interested in your poor, pitiful life. We all have that when we get here. I don't want to hear your moaning, your groaning, your drama, your trauma. I'm not interested in any of that. All I want you to do is take a set of actions, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. And you're going to call me every morning and ask me only one question. What do I do next? Made it very simple for me. For somebody like me, it's got to be simple. And he said, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to go home and I want you to say that 3rd step prayer. I want you to ask God to please help you reveal to you all the names that need to be on this 4-step list. Dick and I did the 1st, 2nd, 3rd step kneeling at that pew that day, which tells me we don't have to drag this thing out. I don't know why people think it's necessary to take a step a month. I would have just killed myself if that's the way it had happened for me. But he did was step 1, 2, and 3 kneeling at that pew that day. And I turned my life and well over to care of Dick, because I didn't really have a God of my understanding at the time. I had the concept. I had done certain spiritual practices and things throughout my life. I've studied especially Native American spiritual concepts and belief. I studied Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, you name it. Hinduism I got really hung up in and I still practice a lot of those practices. So, but that's come after I cleared up the wreckage of my life and my past. Those things became very important with me, and I found a God of my understanding. And so he said, I want you to go home and say that 3rd step prayer, and I want you to turn your life and your will over to care of God and ask one simple question. Dear God, please reveal to me the names that need to be on this list. I want all the names you've had resentments for. He said, anybody that's hurt you, harmed you, lied to you, cheated to you, pissed you off, whatever, just put their name down as they come. It doesn't have to be in any chronological order. And so I had no confidence that this was going to work. And here's God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. One more time, I went and I knelt down. I said that 3rd step prayer. I asked God, please to reveal to me everybody that needs to be on this list. I got still and I got quiet. And I want to tell you, within 30 minutes, 100 names came out of me that I hadn't even thought about in a lifetime. And it was unbelievable, all the way back to my 1st grade teacher. So I've carried resentments my entire life and didn't even know what they were. And I put those down on the list, and I called Dick and I said, you're not going to believe what just happened. I said that prayer. I asked God to reveal to me these names. He said, well, how many did you get? I said, I got over 100 names. And he said, oh my God. And I said, oh my God. And he said, oh, kid, that's not so much. He said, I had 1,500 names on my list. And I went, thank God I'm not as sick as you are. So that was a little bit of reprieve. And, but that man was brilliant with taking people through the 4th step. He knew that that was the solution. He knew that the answer would lie in that. And so he said, now all I want you to do is write down what they did. I don't want a dissertation here. I want 1 or 2 sentences is all you get. What did they do? Be specific. I want bullet points. And I'm good with that. And that's what I did. I called him the next day and he says, well, now once you've written down what they did, I want you to look at what it affected. And I looked at all that, and he had me make a list of those, what those effects were. My personal security, sex relations, the pride and the ambitions and all of that. I made a list of those. And he said, I want you to go to the dictionary and look those words up because I'm pretty sure you don't know what they really mean. And he was right. So I wrote out the definition of those words so that when I apply them to the names, I know what it means. And so I did that. And he said, now I want you to write down, we know what it affected. Let's write down how it affected you. Only a sentence or two. And somehow those things just kind of kept falling out of me, unbeknownst to my thinking. It was just God's grace, I'm sure, that that truth began to be unfolded for me in this process. And so we went on to that, and then we got to that infamous fourth column where I began to see the truth about who and what I was all about. And he told me how to do that. And he gave me an exercise to utilize. And I did that. And with no reservation whatsoever, those things just fell out onto the paper. Pen to paper is what matters here. And I got to see the truth about who and what I'm all about. And he gave me a set of actions to follow with each and every one of those. And it took a couple of hours to go through this, even as brief as all these other things were. And so, when I got through with all that, we were ready for a fifth step. Unbeknownst to me, Dick had cancer and was like dying. I didn't even know that. He left before I could even do a fifth step with him. And God's grace would take him on to the big meeting in the sky. And, and I think once we start on this path of recovery, that God does for us what we can't do for ourselves. And another sponsor would be put into my life. I was asked to hostess this woman. And so I did. And she came to speak at a little conference we had down here. And, she asked me that. I don't know how these people know this kind of stuff, but she said, do you have a sponsor? I guess it's like the big L on my forehead. No, I did not have a sponsor, but you never, ever really want to say this to anybody with a lot of time but I'm thinking about it. So that was not the right answer. And she said, well, why don't you give me a call and I'll be your sponsor? I mean, she just volunteered. It's like each and every step of great significance that's happened for me has been people just falling into my life and giving me a set of directions I would have never understood or comprehended, but I did. I was just so desperately done. I was willing to do what they asked me to do. And she said, you're going to come up and visit with me. And she was about 4 or 5 hours away. And I said, how do you have a sponsor long distance? Because everybody I knew had a sponsor right here in their backyard. And she didn't seem to matter. It didn't matter to her. She had just moved from California, where some of those black belt recovery people are from. And she said, just bring your fourth step up here and we'll do a fifth step. And I finally, after a couple of weeks, called her and asked her to be my sponsor. And I went on up there again, one more time, taking a set of actions contrary to how I think, feel, and believe. And miracles were happening that I really couldn't see why they were happening. I only see it. I live life forward and I understand in hindsight. I realized that God was guiding me every step of the way. I get up there to do a fifth step with her, and I think that's all we're going to do. Oh, no. We not only did fifth step, we did 6, 7, 8, and 9 that day. So I've only been hooked up with people who believe that the quicker you get this done, the quicker the recovery. And I know that to be the truth for me. And that's kind of how I still do it with my sponsees. Because I was literally dying the way I was living and living the way I was dying. And my best thinking was I wish for the end. And, and I began to have some continuity in my life going through this step process that just revealed to me things I'd never, ever comprehended. I love what it says in the 12 and 12. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life can expel the obsession to drink, and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. And I like that, especially that to become happily and usefully whole, to be happy about all this, even though the tragedies of the past, that I love what Father Ed Dowling says, the tragedy of our life is how deep must be our suffering before we learn the simple truth by which we can live. And that's in the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a new freedom and a new happiness for me. And so I went up there and continued to go through the rest of the steps. And on step 9, when I began to look at those, the amends, and that was certainly, she instantly said, every single person on your 4-step list, on your resentment list, every one of those names moves over to your 9th step list. We don't leave anybody out. They deserve some kind of an amends. And it's one of 4 things, either direct, or a letter, or prayer, or financial amends. So one of those 4 things are going to happen for each person on your list. You cannot afford to leave one person off. So, I mean, I'm still so in shock about what's happening and where I am with all this. I'm just willing to do whatever anybody says. And so we make the list. I move my 4th step over to my 9th step. And I name one. And name one for me was God. I mean, I was so resentful of God, of my misunderstanding, that I really wanted no part of that kind of a God. That's why I was looking everywhere else. And she said the most appropriate, perfect thing that touched my heart and changed my life that day. She said, Vivian, God is good, and good is God. If it's not good, it's not of God, it's of man's world. And that just brought such clarity to my understanding, or my misunderstanding of that God. And today I have a very big God in my life. Bigger God, less of me is how this thing works. And so anyway, that was the first one. And the second one was my mom. You know, she basically wasn't available. And I said, I don't recall her ever once saying to me that she loved me in any way. And I never felt that love. I didn't really have a father. I had a stepfather who brought 3 kids into the situation, and she had 3. Come to find out not too long ago that there were 3 different dads. I think she really loved alcoholics, but she was not an alcoholic herself. I love her for who she was. And I said to my sponsor how I felt that she never truly, really loved me. And I felt that might have been the reason for how I became who and what I was all about. And she said, Vivian, did she feed you? Did she put clothes on your back? Did she have a roof over your head? Did she support you? And she absolutely did every one of those things. She said, that's how she showed you she loved you. She did only what she knew to do. If she had known different, she would have done better. But she had to work to support 6 children, not just you. And that prejudice just left me. And that slate was just cleaned up that one day, that miracle of the recovery behind doing all these steps. And so anyway, I want to go back and digress a little bit into, I was born with a deformed stomach. I was in and out of the hospital for the first 9 years of my life. I had the last rites twice that I was told by the age of 9, because they didn't expect me to live. They didn't really know back then. They didn't really know really what was wrong with me. I was having an enormous amount of radiation. I'm surprised I'm not glowing today. But they never really could discover. They thought I had cancer and I wouldn't survive. That was the summation of all that. And on the last day, the last time that they were giving me the last rite, I came to, and the priest was over to my left, and he was anointing me with the last rites, and my family was gathered around this little bed. I was 9 years old. And I came to and I heard, I would awaken to you saying the Lord's Prayer. And there was another miracle in my life that I had no idea about and no comprehension of what was happening, but I survived and I was able to come home and resume going to school. It took a little while to catch up because I had missed so much in the early elementary years. I was able to get through grammar school and junior high, and then I met the Marlboro man. He had a horse, and that really was what was more attractive to me than anything else. So, not the reason to engage in a marriage, but it was my best shot. And my mother really encouraged me. She saw a good opportunity and she wanted that to happen too. I didn't have a better choice. I wanted to go to school. My husband didn't want me to go. And so I forfeited that opportunity because I took the easier, softer way. I married this man and had two beautiful children. I had a son after 2 years, and it was just absolutely the most amazing experience. 2 years went by and I had I wished for a daughter so I could have the perfect family. I already had what most would consider the perfect marriage. I had the perfect house. We had all the things that one would think would make them happy. And you know what? Towards the end of my drinking, none of that helped whatsoever. Not the marriage, not the beautiful home, not the cars, not the material things. The drinking began, the progression of this disease was so diabolical that I couldn't see what I couldn't see until I could. And I began to drink, and my husband would say things, Vivian, if you just wouldn't drink so much. And that was the beginning. And towards the end of that drinking, I abandoned that marriage. I literally could not stay in that marriage. I reached a point where I had to go pursue this beyond where I was. And I walked out of that house and out of that marriage and left those 2 kids with my husband because I knew that he could do a better job. And I thought I was doing a noble thing here. And you know what happened is I didn't realize that until I did my inventory. And I hurt those kids emotionally. I hurt those kids because I was not there. I wasn't available. Once alcohol started taking control of my life, I was never until I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1991. I was full on crazy, full flight from reality, bodily and mentally different, maladjusted to life. Page 52 aptly describes who and what I was all about. And I couldn't do a darn thing about it either. And only God can do this for me as a direct result of doing these steps. And so I went on out there to pursue whatever it was, living that life of incomprehensible demoralization with people I shouldn't have been hooked up with, doing things I should never have done. And it's a wonder I survived because some of those people didn't. So, when it got to later on, I had to do that geographic change from where I was living in Columbia down to Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. And it was here that I would get sober. And it was, I walked into those rooms never expecting or understanding what would lie ahead of me, but I just came because I had nothing better to do or nothing left to lose. That's it. I had already lost the most important things, the most valuable things in my life I'd already given to alcoholism. And so the third name on that list of my resentments was my daughter's name, and her name was Katina Teresa. And she was 9 years old, and my son was 11. And I went over finally one day. I got it together. I'm going to suit up and show up and be the mom they deserve to have or try desperately to be. And I went over early that morning and I wanted to pick both of them. My son couldn't go because he had a little baseball game that day, and I was fine with that. My daughter couldn't wait to jump in the car. And up to the lake we went, and we spent the day. And on the way back, I took a set of actions that caused a car accident, and my little daughter died in that car accident with me. The car turned over on top of both of us, and And I also died in that car accident. And for some reason, I was not meant to go. And God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I ended up in the emergency room, and I came to, and they were operating on me, trying to save my life. I was bleeding internally, and they were trying to save my life. And I remember passing through some portal at that point, because I saw what the doctors were doing, and then all of a sudden I saw nothing. And then I was in the corner of that operating room looking down at those surgeons trying to save me. And the next thing that came into my understanding was my little daughter was sitting right beside me. Wherever we were was not there. And she looked at me and she said, "Mom, you can't stay here. You have to go back." And that was the last thing she said to me that day. And I was in the hospital because the car turned over on me. I had everything broken from the waist up. How I can even move is beyond my understanding, except it's just another miracle. And so it was about a year of recovery. I was brought up on manslaughter charges, and certainly should have been. And I had to deal with all of that. But I did not draw a sober breath once I got out of that hospital to the day I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous on January 3rd, 1991. I drank to die. I drank to not think. I drank to not have those feelings of that tragedy and the tragic things I had done to all my family and all the people that I loved and cared so deeply about, that I had abandoned. The alcoholism stole from me everything of great matter and great importance to me. And when I told this to my sponsor, I was resentful towards my daughter for leaving me. See, I'm still looking to put the blame out here, and I never didn't understand that there was no blame. It was just something that I had to acknowledge, that had to come up and out from the depth of my being, that was killing me on the inside. And once I revealed that truth, the truth is, she said, "Vivian, it's not God's fault. It's not your daughter's fault that accident happened that day. You have to take responsibility for the actions you took that day. And that was no accident. You caused your daughter's death. And how, in God's name, do you live with that kind of information?" And I love what it says on page 124. It says, "Cling to the thought that in God's hand, the darkest past is our greatest possession we have. It is the key to life and happiness for others, because it will avert death and misery for them." And I've been able to use this tragedy to help a lot of other people who have gone exactly through what I had gone through. And my sponsor, when she heard my inventory that day, along with everything else, she said, "Vivian, we're going to make an amends immediately." And that was like within the next day. And I had never been able to bring myself, could not go attend the funeral because I was in the hospital for so long. And then I couldn't go. I could not face the reality of that tragedy until I had no other choice. And so we went to the grave because I wanted nothing more. I didn't even want to live after I came to that realization. I wanted to take my life one more time. And Michael knew that if I didn't deal with this right away, I probably would, because I was already thinking about how to do it. I could not live with that truth. And she said, "We're going to go to that cemetery and you're going to write a letter and you're going to make an amends to your daughter." And she had to help me write that letter. I just didn't even know what to say or do. And she showed me how to do this thing. And that's what you, Alcoholics Anonymous, have done for me every step of the way for the last 30 years. You've shown me precisely what to do and how to do this, how to do this thing called life. And so we went to the grave, and she said, "Vivian, all you have to do is read that letter." And so that's what I did. And I began to read that letter. And I had been practicing some Native American spiritual concepts and beliefs, as I told you earlier, and I still do to this day. I believe in all of that. I think God is all encompassing. I don't believe there's a definition. One definition of God, as I understand it, is everything. And as I began to read that letter, it was on a very hot day, and it was at least 108 degrees, and we were sweating profusely standing there at the gravesite. And I turned to Michael and said, I don't know what to say. And she said, just read the letter. That's all you have to do, Vivian. Just read that letter. So I wrote a very short paragraph or two to my daughter that day. And when I was reading it, this amazing wind started wrapping around, engulfing both Michael and myself. Our hair was standing straight back, and we were, as I recall, instantly cooled. These were things that were just so extraordinary. I couldn't comprehend what was happening, but I was in the middle of a huge spiritual experience because I took those actions contrary to what I wanted to do. And a miracle happened that day. And I felt the presence of God. I felt the presence of my daughter, and I felt forgiveness for the first time in my miserable life. And when I was done reading that letter, the wind disappeared. And over the top of me, at one point, I saw an eagle circling over me. And that eagle to me is so impactful today because it means a returning to one's personal power in Native American spiritual concepts and beliefs. And that just resonates with me so much deeply. And so when I finished reading the letter, Michael went back to get in the car. And because it was so hot, I had the air conditioner running. So she got in the car, and I stayed to have communion with my daughter for a few minutes. And I just sat on the ground there because this had been such an extraordinary thing that had just transpired. And I don't know, I sat there for a length of time. I couldn't tell you how long. And my daughter said two things to me that day. She said, Mom, I have a life, and so do you. Now go on out there and live it. And I believe in telling our story. I am doing what she asked me to do, is to tell about the tragedies of our past and about the recovery that comes as a result of doing the things we don't want to do, and we do them anyway, and we get to see a whole new light. I love the definition of enlightened, freed from ignorance and misinformation based on full comprehension of the problems involved. And I feel so strongly about that. I was able to see what I couldn't see and feel what I couldn't feel and believe, something that came up and out of me beyond my understanding that day because I took those actions. And she said, Mom, I have a life, and so do you. Now go on out there and live it. And this is what I get the privilege to do, to carry our message of hope and recovery. And she had one more message. A little ladybug landed on my skirt that day. And I was afraid to move. I didn't want to breathe hardly, and I didn't want to move because I had just had this amazing experience. And this ladybug landed on my skirt, and she said, Mom, that's my favorite little creature. And that's all that was said. You know, there were no more profound messages, as if that wasn't enough anyway. But the thought, pardon me, the thought came to me that I'd like to start a women's retreat, and I call it the Ladybug Roundup. And I started it the next year, and we're coming up on 27 years this year. And second weekend in November, you ladies are all invited. I would love you to come. And Dolly's going to be speaking there, as a matter of fact. And we're going to have an amazing time. I get to carry a message of hope and recovery to those who can't see a way out. I had a man call me from just being released from jail in a blackout. He shook his 6-month baby to death. Didn't think he could live through that. Once he came to that knowledge, and I could share my story, and I said, this is what you have to do. You have to get up with a sponsor. You have to take a set of actions contrary to what you want to do and watch the miracle happen for you, because it happened for me. So I get to carry that message. I've had several other women who have been in cars with their kids and did the same thing and were drunk and had no way out of that incomprehensible to actions that we just can't possibly handle. We had to surrender to this process. And they too are living a sober life today as a direct result of following these 12 steps. doing what we're asked to do here in spite of what we think. And so I'm here to tell you that if I abandon everything I thought I knew about this process and just pick up the spiritual kit of tools and one day at a time do what I'm asked to do here, a miracle happens every single day of our life. Step one is the truth about the problem. Step two is the truth about the solution. Step three is the truth about what blocks us from experiencing a solution. Steps 4 through 9 get us unblocked, and steps 10 through 12 keep us unblocked. And I love on page 19 where it says, after such an approach, many will pick up their beds and walk again. I love that statement because that's what I get to do one day at a time. So I think that that's all I got, Glenn. I don't have anything left to say except that I'm grateful that I get to come here and share my experience, strength, and hope. And God bless each and every one of you. And thank you for having me today. God bless you.